Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Fitness Education Series produced by the Australian Fitness Academy. It's like progressive overload for your brain. I'm your host, Tom Rock, and today's episode, part 2 of the programming series. So we'll get stuck into this one. Hopefully, if you haven't listened to part 1, there's a link in the description, or you can just jump back and listen to last week's podcast. But we're going to follow on from that. So last week we looked at initially building, it was a longer term program, so over 30 weeks. And we broke it up into blocks initially. So I'll bring that up on the screen here. And this is where we sort of based our discussion on. So we had different blocks and we talked about transitioning through different blocks and setting up, I guess, different goals and the importance of that throughout the program. And what this really does is allow us to program and have a goal in mind when we are developing our exercise selection, sets, reps, and how our overall program structure can be based on a specific goal. And depending on a goal, whether it, for example, here is hypertrophy, strength, is it to get leaner? It could be more of a sport-specific goal and performance-related in terms of a marathon, team sport, getting stronger, powerlifting, anything. But our goal is going to dictate what our session structure and session frequency and what our overall program looks like. So this sort of setup allows us to have those discussions and gives us a baseline that we can base our programs on. And we know for this 5-week block, that we're in 5-week blocks here in this example, but in this 5-week block, we can program to hit that specific target or that specific goal, and we can look to apply progression throughout this block as well, which is what we'll end up getting to in probably some later episodes, is how we develop that progression. What I want to touch on this week and give you guys my thoughts on, and if you do have any thoughts or questions or ideas, definitely shoot me an email at tom@afa.com.au as well. The more input I get from you guys throughout this series, the better it is going to be. But what I want to look at this week and discuss is our weekly structure. So we've got our program structure, and we've talked a little bit about goals, and we'll slowly start to match our program to goals. But the next important phase, and what we sort of will do here, is we're going to zoom in and look at, for example, block 1, which is the ease in or the build phase, general program phase, just to sort of ease back into a program. And we're just going to look at this on a weekly basis. And I've got some examples here, and this is just to form the discussion. We won't come to an overall conclusion today. I want to get your thoughts on options, what you think is best for certain circumstances, potentially what's your favorite sort of weekly structure, what have you done in the past, what do you currently do? But there's so many options in terms of weekly structure. And this weekly structure may change depending on the phase of the program or goal of that block. So we're going to have a look at weekly options, but you might find that we might find as we develop this program out, we have some weekly structures for say this block, but then when we get to maybe the hypertrophy block or we get through to the strength block, our weekly structure starts to change based on us trying to make the most efficient program for that goal. So my strength block may have a different weekly structure to my hypertrophy block, and my hypertrophy block may have a different weekly structure to my initial build-in phase. So the weekly structure might change depending on goal. So that's something to consider as we start to build out this program. But we're going to look at some examples here and just discuss the differences. And when we look at applying different structures to different goals, that may be based on outcomes and what we're trying to achieve. It's easier if you're looking at more of a cardiovascular and a resistance goal, because obviously your cardiovascular training is going to take precedence. If you're going more of a hypertrophy or resistance or strength training goal, your cardiovascular training probably takes a backseat, and you reduce the frequency of that. When it comes to the difference of hypertrophy and strength, you're going to have to look at, it could be recovery days. It could be if there's certain goals, you might change the structure around to split the volume or training stress over different days of the week to allow greater recovery, depending on your goal for maybe strength or hypertrophy. So lots of things to consider. In these examples here, I've just given a few examples. And the other thing that comes into play with session frequent or weekly structure is client availability or training time frame availability, even equipment availability or ability to get to the gym, as well as how long we spend in the gym, because that'll dictate what sort of program we can potentially follow in terms of resistance training. But here's some examples we'll sort of run through. So we've got in this section here, so week 1, we've got full body 3 times a week with cardio on a Tuesday and a Saturday. So, and rest days on a Thursday and Sunday. So very simple setup. It means you're in the gym 3 days a week doing full body programs with cardio on your other days. Again, next week, we'll probably build in to a specific sessions and, okay, we've got cardio on this day. What does that look like based on the goal? So that's something we'll build to next week. This week, we're going to focus on the weekly structure. So in this week 2, but it's just just a place to put an example. We've got full body in the morning and cardio in the afternoon. So we've put our training on the same day. So we've got an extra rest day within this week, and we've also got a split full body and cardio. But we've put our resistance and cardio on the same day for this example. This allows us to get 3 cardio sessions in per week. But again, then we've got 2 training sessions within the same day, with the resistance training in the morning, cardiovascular training in the afternoon, which is something you're going to have to consider fatigue management around, and as well as time availability. Not everyone has the ability to, say, do an hour full body training session in the morning and then maybe spend 30 to 60 minutes on cardiovascular training in the afternoon. So something that might consider if you have other rest days, or you got days where you have more time availability and more days that you potentially can rest. Again, this could be, given we got cardio on Monday and Wednesday, this could be a rest day too, which means you've got 3 full days of rest. Again, you could move this around. If you've got more time on weekends, maybe your training days are on the weekends and your rest days are during the week. So lots of different options to play around with based on a client's availability. So when we're thinking about weekly structure, it's not a one size fits all. And in terms of individualizing a program to a client or to suit a client, this is probably a major step that needs to be considered, because while exercise and things should be tailored to a client, and it will make a difference based on preference and goals, session frequency or weekly structure is going to be make or break in terms of them being able to stick to it on a consistent basis. If we program too many sessions throughout the week, that just makes their life a lot harder. That's not going to be something they can do consistently. So we have to be able to create a frequency or a weekly structure that is well suited to that client's or individual's lifestyle. And then we work on the exercise selection and the individual makeup of those sessions once we have a weekly structure that client can make and can commit to. In this next example, we've got full body cardio, and then resistance cardio on the Friday. So that's very similar to the first one, except we've merged a resistance and cardio on the Friday, which basically means I've taken a cardiovascular training out of the Saturday, but I've sort of put this as one session, whereas we had AM full body and a PM cardio. This is more if we can merge a resistance training and cardio into the same session. This will suit certain clients. So depending on their goal, and if it's a general fitness goal, you can definitely put resistance training and cardiovascular training in the same session. You may not be able to do an hour or 45 minutes of long, slow distance cardio, but a little HIIT circuit at the end of a session for maybe 10 to 15 minutes is definitely doable. So you can do a full body resistance training session plus 10 to 15 minutes of sort of a HIIT little circuit, or some sort of intervals, or even just a sort of a high intensity tempo run or row or ride for 15 minutes, maybe. Could be 20, depending on how you balance that program. But if this is something they need to consider in order to get the work in, resistance and cardio in the same session is absolutely an option. And then when you look at that individual session and say we went with this option and we're planning that, then we've got to work out, is resistance more important or is cardiovascular training more important for that session? Because that'll dictate which one goes first. Am I doing the cardiovascular training first or the resistance training first? That'll come into that conversation. There's not always a right and wrong, but it definitely dependent on the client goals and maximizing performance for the program and their goals. And then we go on to week 4. Our last little example here is another one where we've got an upper body, lower body, and then a full body on the Saturday. So all of these examples have us doing resistance training 3 days a week, which it doesn't have to be. You could do full body twice a week. You could do, in this example, we've got upper, lower. You could do upper, lower, upper, lower. So the classic upper, lower split is another option, but that would mean you have to be in the gym 4 days per week. And if we're putting cardiovascular training in around it, we want to be able to recover as best as possible between sessions and allow recovery. If we're doing 4 days in the gym and 2 or 3 days cardio, the week gets very full very quickly. So there's options, and you can definitely do upper lower programming with cardiovascular on the side, but you might find to maximize recovery and enjoyment and consistency, this can be simpler. If you miss a full body session, it can be made up. If you miss an upper session and you've got upper lower throughout the week, it's very hard to sort of catch up, or you end up missing an upper day that week and you don't see a lot of progress potentially from only training the muscle group once per week. So however we go about it, we generally want to be at least training our muscles 2 times a week, potentially 3 times a week if we can get it in, and then we can sort of manage our session volume a little bit better. We don't need to do as many sets if we're training a muscle group 3 times a week, and we can then fit in our cardio around that potentially. So these are just some different options that I'd sort of highlight in terms of weekly structure. And these are all based on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and more training during the week, but it could be flipped and you could do more training on the weekend if that's sort of your availability and how you want to look at it. But just some ideas to get us started on weekly structure, as I think it's the next crucial element to developing a program, but developing a really well-rounded, well-thought-out program is, how do I want my weekly structure to look? And it's a conversation to include the client with, I think, in some circumstances, so they can get the benefit. If it has to fit in with a program and a gym and your availability and timeframes, okay. But if we're trying to talk to a client or develop a program that's going to be really beneficial, knowing something they can stick to and enjoy is really important. And weekly structure plays a big role in that. So we could name this week 1, week 2, week 3, and then we've got the upper lower a little bit in week 4. If you've got a preference out of these, let me know. Just comment week 1, week 2, week 3, or week 4. Send me an email, tom@afa.com.au. Or if you've got a different weekly structure that you think would be useful or beneficial, or you'd like to share that I can touch on next week, that'd be great. Send me an email as well. Love to hear what sort of weekly structure you guys do in terms of your resistance training and cardiovascular training, or just how you split up your resistance program potentially throughout the week, or how many times you're at the gym, all sorts of things. But it's definitely something to consider, is how you want to set that week up. So yeah, bit of an insight into that one, guys. And that's, I think, the next step in developing a program. What we're going to touch on in the next part of the series, so part 3, is I'll come back. I'll pick a weekly structure. We'll go with a weekly structure. We'll pick 1, 2, 3, or 4 potentially, and then we'll start to piece together, okay, if that's my weekly structure, how do I start to program a session and then progress that over a 4 or 5 week period in this example potentially. So next week next part 3, we're going to look at taking the weekly structure and then developing what do we actually put in those sessions based on the goal of the phase. In this phase, it's this one, but it could be strength or hypertrophy, what makes up the session, and then how we would go about progressing that over a period of time throughout that block potentially. But that's what's coming in future, guys. If you've got any thoughts on this one, send me an email, leave a comment, let me know which sort of weekly structure works well, or you think would work well, or which weekly structure works well for you. Love to hear that too. But other than that, guys, hope you got a bit out of this one. Look forward to chatting to you in the next one. Other than that, guys, have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you all soon.